welcome. Um, I am going to cover these legal, ethical, and multicultural dynamics in group. So let's see if I can make it big enough for you. Um, I know some of you are remote, and I don't want to have any notes because that kind of messes it up. Let's go down. All right. So, um, basically, this week, knowing that in social work we are a very diverse crowd, and
What is that? Are door locks make securing your home even
Okay.
inconvenient?
maybe I should just mute this one, but I don't know where that noise is coming from. Anyway, so identify key legal, ethical considerations for conducting group work, because stuff like that does come up. Um, if you've already had the intro to social work class, which by this point most of you should have completed, you'll see the code of ethics that we have. That's the NASW code of ethics. You can download it for free. And then every state and city, I know some of you are from different states, have their own legal implications. So the law and covering where the law and the ethics overlap. Because sometimes the law isn't inclusive of our own ethics. And that's why, NASW went to the extreme it did to make its own code of ethics. Because some things that you could do might be legal, but may not necessarily be ethical. And vice versa. Some things you do that are ethical might even be illegal. I'm thinking of an example even at our food pantry. I'll leave it unnamed. Undocumented folks, because we take the social security numbers of everyone and give out food, but we also take donations for, there's several undocumented folks at the church and the food pantry. So ethical, maybe illegal, so there's always that gray area. That's kind of why they show this overlap and the differences. And right here where we focus is actually where the law and the ethics overlap. So this is from the book Gladding. Ethics here, they're suggested standards of conduct. They're all based on professional values. And the social worker code of ethics, like I mentioned, it is a free download. You have to write a paper on it in 101. It's called the values paper, an intro to social work class. Most of them are going to cover autonomy, beneficence, non-malfeasance, justice, fidelity, and veracity. So the code of ethics created by organizations to set standards and principles as guidelines for their members to follow. That's a quote from Association of Group Work Best Practice Guidelines. Same thing goes for the social work code of ethics. So something to be mindful of. So here's some of the major ethical issues. I know you might have to download the PowerPoint on your end to be able to see it not in reverse. I actually don't know how to flip that. If anybody does, let me know. So the major ethical issues, first is training of group leaders. So kind of what we're doing now, making sure that you're not going to go into a group and just lead it randomly without any training. And a lot of times your agencies will throw you into a group knowing that you at least get a small training in your BSW program. Some of them are kind enough to train you. I remember the first group I led, they basically had me watch somebody one time and then I had to mimic it the next time. Other major ethical issues, you have the screening of potential members. So the way you screen out people, for example, we had a trauma group we led at Lighthouse Youth Services. There were some kids that were not ready for the trauma group. So in fact, they would go back and say to them, maybe sit this one out so you could find out within 1 or 2 sessions and come back when you want to be here, when you're ready, because there was sometimes behaviors if they were forced into it or didn't want to be there. So it helped when they were actually involved. That even makes it harder with court order members because we always talk about social work and counseling being voluntary procedures. And, when you're court ordered, you still do have the choice to go to jail instead of going to the group. But it seems like a poor choice. So that is one other thing to consider. Also, the rights of group members. I've talked about this in earlier classes. We are bound by the code of ethics, like we have to follow keeping confidentiality, unless if someone is, say, a harm to self or a harm to others. And that's because it is kind of a big deal. It's something that you may not be able to really enforce once the group is over. So that's kind of the shame. Letting it be known that we respect confidentiality as social workers. Other group members, not so much, are bound by that. Maybe there's some ways to enforce it, but that's another thing that's kind of ethical to keep your stuff confidential in your group. But there might not be a law to enforce, so they could go like mouth off about what happened in the group to other people. Now, personal and dual relationships, that's one that's covered in all code of ethics, the length of time. So this is something that could be legal. You legally could have a relationship with a discharge client even, but in social work, our code of ethics, I know for a while it said for life, we do not have, especially a romantic relationship. And if you do have a personal relationship of somebody who comes to your agency, you let that be known so they would be passed on to somebody else and hopefully go into another group because we try not to have those dual relationships. Use of group techniques, everyone's different the way they lead their groups. So that's something to consider. Different alcoholism groups focus on other different things. There's also the leader's values to keep in mind. We don't want to force our values onto other people, and that becomes tricky. Sometimes we're passionate about what it is. It might even be something very political, and we just don't push that onto group members. So again, it's legal to, but is it ethical to? No. We stay neutral. Records, so how we keep our record keeping everything confidential, keeping everything private, writing your notes in such a way to know that they could request it at any time, either in the courts or the client themselves could request it. So we always keep that in mind. And then closure and follow-up. That's something social workers, we always need more training on because closure is sometimes hard for folks. And following up, if like the client kind of bows out, to make sure they have proper closure or they're passed on to a group that would better meet their needs, so to speak. Some of the legal issues. So the law refers to a body of agreed upon rules of a society set forth basic principles for living together as a group. That's from Gladding. The overlap between legal and ethical issues, as we mentioned before, like some things are legal but not ethical. Some things are ethical but not legal. We're trying to zero in on what are both. So you'll have community laws, you'd have state laws, there's even national standards, we have federal laws. Now, where to find them? Nowadays you can almost do a search for anything. You just make sure it's from the proper state. I know some of you are from Illinois, so making sure the code in Illinois is similar to Ohio, or if it's different, how is it different? And then legal action. Sometimes, I I've heard of more of a licensed psychologist, and I forget why, but they had legal action taken against them. It could have been confidentiality. They weren't good at keeping things confidential. And underneath that, it has prevention with an exclamation point. So the number one key is to avoid legal action is prevention of legal action. So just being sure you're covering all of the areas, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, and preventing that from happening. If you do that and there is legal action, you should be in the clear. You should be covered by a code, a law, a code of ethics, things of that nature. So in summary, ethics suggests standards of conduct based on a set of professional values. And these professional values would be, again, autonomy, that the client has the right to autonomy, they can make their own choices. The beneficence, hard to say, but that to do good, to do work for the benefit of clients. Non-malfeasance, to do no harm. Justice, so to work towards good fidelity and veracity, to work hard with the clients. The law is a body of rules recognized by state or community as binding on its members. And then there is overlap between ethics and law, and group workers must be familiar with both in order to make the kinds of decisions necessary to promote effective outcomes for the members. So again, being sure, and part of the licensure test will cover those. So making sure you know what you have to, et cetera, et cetera. And here's some areas you can look up: the Association of Group Work, so professional standards. Also, in Ohio, here we have the Ohio Counselor, Social Worker, and Marriage and Family Therapist rules. So you should be able to click on this. Let me see if it's, I feel like you have to control click, and then it'll open the website. So it's been updated, but this is the website. You go to CSWMFT. Here's how you would get licensed in the state of Ohio. That's where I will renew actually in September. So every second year, here's how you prepare for a license. They have different licensure questions, license prep resources. Those are fun because they're free. Just so you how you apply for the LSW, how you apply for the LPC. So here's for professionals, and then here's for the public. So you can file a complaint. So the e-license portal, you can go look up a social worker. You can look up the disciplined licenses. So these are people that have affected the law. And you can do a search for, there's 880 in here. So you could look at 100 per page, which is crazy. So there was a situation, actually somebody I had done my MSW with, and I meant to look if it's, oh, I guess it's still not in there. But you can look up people, you can look up the consent agreement, the revocation, folks, why they lost their license. You can view the complaint, so you can go into it here. Looks like a court document, so this is the legal part. State of Ohio, counselor and social worker, marriage and family, against the person Schwartz. It's public information. Says between 2018 and 2019, employed at a mental health agency in Ashland, Ohio, she blurred her professional boundaries with the client by interacting with the client on social media and giving client gifts. So her actions constitute a violation of Ohio Revised Code, section 4757306. She admits the statements referenced in paragraph 2, and they give what she has to do to get her license back. So Schwartz must receive personal counseling from a board-approved mental health professional. She is required to meet with this mental health professional for a minimum of 2 one-hour sessions a month. All costs associated are at her expense. She must submit name, contact, resume, and the vita to the board's deputy. 2 years of mandated counseling. She also must take 6 hours of continuing social work education in the area of professional ethics and boundaries, which we have to do every year anyway. Hours pre-approved, signature, consent, and then that's pretty much her punishment. So kind of how she would move on. It is kind of interesting looking through these, though, that there's 880 people in here, and I've got 100 per page. So I guess it's like, 9 per page, or 9 pages for 880 people. And, sometimes you look for people you work with, because sometimes you can find folks that, like, you can see the way that they practice. And it is, it is kind of amazing when you've already known, you're like, I just don't know if what they're doing is perfectly within boundaries. So you go to look them up, and sure enough, sometimes you do find them. So I will jump on one other one real fast because I just want to get the idea. So this is revocation. That must mean their license was taken. It was in 2011, so it sounds like they did lose a license. They could appeal it. And like I said, sometimes they'll be pretty specific how they get their license back, things of that nature. Surrender, I think that's when they surrender their license. And yeah, so it gives you kind of the full, sometimes these are good to look at just so you know what is legal and illegal. Sometimes you don't think about that even. Like, especially the social media thing, and then the gifts. You look it up and they say, like sometimes you're allowed to give something less than $20 or receive something less than $20. So here's a reprimand. Maybe that one's a little less. That's the first one I found seemed to be the best and easiest with the details. So anyway, you get the idea, and those are public information. So it's something you want to be clear on. Let me get back to our PowerPoint. So you can also look up, the group code of ethics, the NASW code of ethics, things of that nature. Then I want to take a quick break, leading into multicultural issues. So I'm actually going to start that off with a video real fast about the groups we had to lead at St. Leo with folks from Burundi. And you can look it up under Story of Our Elders at St. Leo's, and give you guys something to watch for a minute, and be right back. That's the garden we made with them at St. Leo's right off of the 75 exit.
Hey.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlotte, and today I'm going to talk about videos that you'll be watching in a few minutes. First, let me tell you about the Burundians and their early life. I don't really know that much about them, but I'll share what I know, and I hope that you learn more as you watch these videos. Burundi, it's a small country that located in East Africa, which is the first country in Africa, also in the world. In 1972, a war happened between two athletes, which caused almost everyone to move from the country. Lots of families separated during the war. Some of the families are here in the United States, and some of them are still back in Africa. Others are around the world. At this moment, you're going to watch the videos, and I hope you enjoy them just as we create them for you.
twarakina twarasimba igihe hageze mu ci aho rero bageze rero baruhutse bara twarasimba nk'intuze twarakina sana twarakina agapira twarabanga imipira isanzwe canke hariho ibindi twimba ku musozi ibintu bitaye igano twaravyimba tukabisekura tukabirumba mu mupira ugakubita gutyo ugadundika nivyo twagira nivyo twakina imipira hari ibindi biti bita iminyango nibyo twarabizingazinga tukabivangamo imipira aho nibyo twatera twagiza gukina nibyo twakina nayo imipira nk'iyindi yari isanzwe arakinira mu ibarabara aho mwagize ngo mu giharuharo igihe cyo muci cyane cyane ivumbi rigatumuka abana twakunda kandi kakavumbi mugasanga ni byiza kabisa
muri 67 umva rero narongora mu kwa gatatu itariki zitatu tubana n'umugore muri icyo gihe twari twarabanye hageze mu kwezi kwa 10 yabatizwa uyu mwaka nyine 67 maze kubatizwa turi kumwe n'umugore turagenda igihanga turabatizwa misiyoni nkuru amaze kubatizwa hasi badusezeranye n'umugore 68 ubwo n'umwana ahita arabatizwa
imfungurwa twarihimira n'amaboko yazo
nyuma barangura kuko iwacu bari abantu bafise inka arareba kwirirwa inyuma y'inka ndagarukiye mu mwaka wa 3 arangura ati mwana wanjye wewe ugume hano uzoragirira uzogura imashini uzobarira nuko nta kintu ndende muri izo rwacu ababyeyi kubaho mandagirwa
hari mu kwezi kwa 4 hari ku munsi wa 6 mu ntara ya Rumonge yatanguye saa 6 y'izuba muri provinsi Bujumbura itangura isaha 4 z'ijoro kandi abayitanguye nabari ku butegetsi
ubwoko bwari buhari ariko muri ico gihe bwaradutse ndetse ibyo byazanywe n'umuperezida yari ahari yitwa Micombe
abasoda batangura kwihereza ibisagara
barondera agatumba bakarondera iki akantu k'ubwoko ariko
bagenda bitsa abo bidasangiye ubwoko kugira ngo bagumeho bonyine.
ati mwarubatse inzu ziboneka bavuga ngo reka bariya abantu bariya amafaranga bayakuye kandi bakarungika aba bazi ngo reka mugenda mwicibura ngo bariya no kugenda mukabica ngo bariya ngo nibo bariye intuze amafaranga y'igihugu bakaza bagafata urugo mbese bwari bw'ubwoko bakaza bagatera ku rugo bakabica.
mu matubwira abatutsi bahiga abahutu batera ibisito by'imigano bakabisogota abagore bafite inda.
Hello again. You just watched a short video of the Burundian community. As you saw, the war was a tragedy for the Burundians. The effects of the war still continue to this very day, as Burundi have the second highest number of refugees in the world. But there's more to the Burundian story besides the war. We try to show you that in the first part of the video. But there's so much more to discover about the Burundians. And I hope that you will take your time to learn more about us. Thank you.
So that is St. Leo's Parish in Cincinnati. There's about 300 Burundians and also 400 Guatemalans from some from Chela. And this is where I usually like to start with the multicultural issues because, as mentioned in social work, we are very diverse in America, extremely diverse. So preparing to serve many populations is something that takes special training for also. I remember when I worked at Claremont Recovery Center, it was 80% Appalachian. So they gave us a training for Appalachia. And that was important to have. At Lighthouse, they've given us special trainings, inner city Cincinnati, at St. Leo's, lots of considerations taken. Make sure this doesn't play. See if it pauses. Nope. So as with a lot of areas in social work, we enter with a holistic approach. So entering the ecological model and knowing that when we work with people, we need to keep all this in mind. So this week, as it's mentioned, learning objectives, you will identify multicultural issues related to group work and then even assess your own awareness and understanding of cultural values, competence, and comfort for multicultural considerations in group work. So the diversity in group, diversity exists in these areas, which is race, ethnicity, language, culture, gender, socioeconomic status, which we see a lot in social work, sexual orientation, religion, ableism, and more. So lots of those areas to consider there. And sometimes you'll have many all at once. It might not just be one of those, which I feel like we had that at St. Leo's, especially with ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, culture, even their culture's ideas of gender. And that was important to keep in mind. Also important to keep in mind, they came from a Civil War torn country. So they're post-Civil War refugees, and keeping that in the forefront of the mind during your approach. And that's important. So working effectively with these diverse populations, you would define and acknowledge their culture. It could take modification of theory and technique, like you might have to change something, like what you had planned for group may change knowing some of those multicultural differences. Also developing group theory and technique. So as you're developing it, keeping that in mind. What we did at St. Leo's, we actually interviewed them as a doctoral student and asked what would be most helpful for them to their transition in the United States. And they came up with two things. That's why you saw the garden at the beginning. They mentioned areas to grow their own food and feel safe in their neighborhood. And then learning English as a second language to pass the citizenship test, because they were given about 3 years to pass the citizenship test. And if you didn't pass it, actually your benefits ran out, so you wouldn't have food stamps and things of that nature. So it was kind of important. They were permanent residents of the United States. They would always stay here, but they really did need to study for that citizenship test. So we'd even go over citizenship questions. So next, you're going to be defining, acknowledging culture. So culture encompasses values, beliefs, and behaviors shared by a group of people. Broadly defined, culture takes into consideration demographic variables, age, gender, the residence. You know, they had changed residence from Burundi to Cincinnati. That's pretty significant. It snows here. It's going to be 0 on Saturday. There are permanent residents here. Broadly defined, culture takes into consideration demographic variables. We mentioned status variables like social, educational, and economic. Some of them had gotten their education in their home country, but they come here and their degrees are not valid. They have to retake whatever they had taken in English, which is kind of annoying. And affiliation, so formal and informal. Then there's diversity competent group counselors. They're able to explore the impact of cultural factors on all of their clients and all aspects of their lives. They are diversity competent in the areas of beliefs, attitude, knowledge, and skills. And that's from the famous group teachers, Corey, and Corey. And I've mentioned before that it's important to always consider these things that are, what is able to make you a diversity competent counselor, because things are always changing. There's new trainings all the time. Most of your agencies will train you in these areas that you have to be competent in, more than likely. So some dimensions of culture. The surface dimensions are like music and food. There's some deeper dimensions like faith, religion, values, language, and family structure. That's partly why St. Leo's took on the Burundians, because in their country, they're like 80% Catholic and it's 90% Christian over there. What's visible, sometimes race or gender, and then invisible is like ethnicity, the sexual orientation, and even your social class. Although as you practice social work longer, you can see poverty a lot easier. You can see the wearing of their shoes, the miscolored stains on a shirt or teeth, unkempt hair, homelessness type of things. So if this video works, this is an older one, we are going to, I may actually have you guys access it from your homes. Like I said, sometimes it is backwards. Let's see, control. Yeah, you have to, so to watch it, you have to press control and click on it. You may also have to search it too. All right. May have to search it before we get into it. So working effectively with diverse populations, defining and acknowledging culture. Again, modification of theory and technique. You may have to change things up. Things might have to be slightly different. And then developing group theory and techniques. So your group can change. You may do something that is related to the group you are serving. And then also myth busting. So discussing differences openly, that can be good. Discussing, sometimes there is homogeneity in groups. Then the role of differences and task and psychoeducational groups. And then theory and culture. Sometimes that's an interesting discussion with different groups that you're working with. Here is multicultural group work in action. So again, recruitment and screening. for safety reasons, sometimes you may not mix. Like in Africa, there are the Hutus and the Tutsis, and that's part of what the Civil War was over. And when we first got into doing groups, people wanted to make sure that they were okay with one another, that there was safety. Then, in your planning and strategies of how you're going to disseminate your group, making sure to cover all of the diversity areas. And as a group leader, so you want to have some of these self-awareness and also with your group members, increasing awareness and the ability. That could be consultation, immersion, checking in, because things change on the daily. And finally, language training. You may learn some of their language if they speak a second language, as they certainly are trying to learn English as a second language. So that sometimes can help connect on a deeper level. And then some more aspects of culture. There's, substance use is a part of culture. So that was something that was interesting to me. But even some Native American ceremonies where they use peyote and go into the desert. And alcoholism in the German and Irish culture, normal to begin drinking at a young age, but some may not have the bug, or once they start drinking, they can't stop. Things of that nature. The setting, practical implications. So therapy groups may involve clashes of culture or subculture. Sometimes you see that. So addressing that as a leader. Then also interpersonal learning is the process through which group members learn to accept that not everyone in the group holds the same set of assumptions, beliefs, customs, roles, norms, and habits. So as a leader, embracing that and letting it be known that we can all agree to disagree at times. Also, as a group leader, therapists must prepare for their work by enhancing their own awareness of possible dynamics associated with culture and developing a sensitivity to address them. And as I mentioned, your agency may give you multicultural trainings. That might be an important part of what they do. So keeping that in mind, and then also examining your own cultural background in terms of assumptions, beliefs, customs, rules, norms, and habit. And that is the first step of the process. So, just being accountable, being aware, knowing what you do, and, being open-minded with things. So, and then finally, we're probably going to have some of the summaries. So in summary, culture encompasses the values, the beliefs, and behaviors shared by a group of people, broadly defined. Culture takes into consideration demographic variables. So that's age, gender, and residence. Like even in Cincinnati, we have East Siders and West Siders. Status variables, social education, and economics. So in some alcoholism groups, you'll have people that have a PhD and then some folks that don't even have an 8th grade education. And that might affect their socioeconomic status. And then affiliations, so formal and informal. Sometimes when you get to know folks on a deeper level, you can be more informal. And finally, dimensions of culture include surface and deeper dimensions, as well as visible and invisible dimensions. Self-awareness is a necessary step in the process of developing multicultural competence. So, the trainings are helpful. Most important is us staying accountable in ways that we can. Because there are things that come up while leading these groups and things to consider. So there's a lot. If you want to do searches on the group members, maybe consider searching. The most famous teacher on groups is Corey, and Corey, which I know sounds kind of interesting because it's basically like mom, dad, brother, and sister, and they all present. Oh, I don't know if my UC login still works. No, it's a bummer. I'll try to do that later on, actually. So yeah, if you're searching for more group stuff, search Corey, and Corey, and consider some of these things. Hopefully this won't kick the video off, but we're almost done. I'll leave room for questions, obviously, in the live chat right now, or if you watch this later, in the later chat, and that's okay. Shoot, I don't know if it's going to totally work. And if you guys have any other questions about the assignment, so remember, we're all visibly observing a group. That's the first major assignment. I know that a lot of you have gotten that completed. So turn in your write-up. I will keep it open, so if you're late, turn it in anyway, because that's a key one. So you'll learn your write-up, then next you will lead a group. So if you pick something from the girls' circle and the manual I have online, that is one of the easiest ways. And finally, creating your own.
If you were not expecting this call, please hang up. Otherwise, press any key on your phone to walk. Thank you. Goodbye.
And the final one is creating your own group and doing grants on, like, say, grants.gov. And we were looking up, agencies you would be interested in working at and doing your work on. And yeah, searching for, so applying for grants, education grants, women and minorities, grants for small businesses, things of that nature, but something of a group for a mental health profession. So keeping all those in mind, and, stay warm this weekend. Do some self-care, because it's supposed to get down to 0. And I will add your chat in. It actually is on multicultural groups. And keep me up to date, because sometimes it is weird not seeing you guys occasionally. Hopefully when you're leading your groups, you're going to do that in person and not just film it, because that will be the big one to get the grade on. And I saw some of you have already signed up. So shoot over any questions, stay warm, and get ready. We're already a third of the way through the semester. Believe that or not, we are moving quickly. So see ya and have a good one.